Hey guys, welcome back to another video. It's Akapi Plays here. And as I'm sure you can tell from the thumbnail and title of this video, I'm going to be building a habitat for meerkats. Now with this build, and I really wanted to make sure I left a good first impression on everyone who's just joining the channel, or maybe they already seen one video before. And so I tried to make it very detailed and quite realistic if I can. And before I get started, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for the reception of last video. And it did so much better than I thought it would. Obviously it was an entrance video, so it's never gonna do as well as the habitats, but thank you anyway. The inspiration for this build was actually a habitat in Amsterdam Royal Zoo. I'm not sure as to what habitat was for, because I just found a photo on Pinterest, but I think either way it's quite a good build to start off with. I'm just building the indoor viewing area here now, and I actually think this is the first time I've ever actually done the detailed indoor area. Usually I just leave that for backstage, but I thought since I'm doing this series on YouTube, I'll try and make it look the best I can. I actually used some of the tile pieces recolored just to make a nice trim around the edges, and what you can see at this point is I'm starting to build a door for the meerkats to enter, and it did work originally, but after I added things, the habitat it stopped working and I couldn't get the traversable areas work, which was strange, but I just left it and continued to build with plaster and different tile pieces like I did in the first video, because I thought why not stick to a theme for the entrance area. I actually chose meerkats because I thought they were quite interesting animals to put at the start of the zoo. Many zoos that I've been to have meerkats right at the front of the zoo, and I saw that and thought why not do the same. Meerkats are very active and energetic, so they're quite a good animal to start your zoo off with. They are actually part of the mongoose family and can live in groups as little as 3 and up to 50 members, which I just think is crazy. They live on the southern tip of Africa, and as I'm sure you know, they live in deserts, which is why I just thought might not make them our entrance animal. They can grow up to 50 centimeters long, and they're very social, so as you'll see towards the end, and in the cinematics, we have quite a large group of them. At this point in the video, I'm starting to work on their actual habitat. I did actually build rock walls, which I saw many people have done before, but I used the impingo trees and just turned them upside down and filled in the gaps at the bottom with some stalagmites and stalactites, and I also decorated around it with some desert foliage. Here you can see I made a mound out of rocks and just elevated the terrain, just so the habitat doesn't look so flat. I also used some of Cesar Creates rock walls and rock piles, just to add definition to the habitat. And I added some tree stumps and dead roots across the habitat, and lots of dry grass. This habitat is going to be quite bare, because it is obviously in a desert, and it is for meerkats which dig a lot, so we don't have many trees, so I think I added 2 by the end, I'm not sure. But either way, I had to kind of prioritize more grasses and small shrubs than trees. I did also flip upside down that small hanging plant from the Oceania pack, and I can't remember the name of it, but it works really well as a nice desert grass, and even with some little greenery in the middle. I did a lot of decals around this point of the video and recolored them to try and get as close to the sand as I could. Round about here, I started making area for kids, and I added some buckets from the conservation pack and some trowels as well. And I also added this puzzle feeder. I'm not exactly sure why I did that. I thought maybe it will just make it look a bit more interesting, and because maybe kids could pretend that they were the meerkats, I don't know. And before you say anything, yes, I know that this would not work in a real zoo and it would get way too messy, but this is meant to be sort of a low budget zoo, and obviously it's not real, so it's no big deal either way. I did also add some rocks, and the tree stumps like I was talking about, which I thought looked quite nice, which is actually a requirement for meerkat habitats to have in real zoos, because they like to go on something called sentry duty, where one meerkat will look out for all the rest and they'll swap that round occasionally. As you can see here, I'm getting started on the inside of the habitat, and you will see that it's very kind of squished and a bit cramped almost, but that was kind of the vibes that I was going for, because it's meant to be like a place where you can go at night or in the winter when it gets very cold. Again, I'm using Cesar Creates rock walls to create our background for the habitat. And as you'll see in a minute, I did also add a burrow right in that little crevice, and I just thought he's a perfect place. One unfortunately can't actually use it. They can't use any of this interior. So I did just place a few in, and for the end, cinematics of course, as you'd expect, I decorated it with lots of rocks and twigs, and I actually placed a heat lamp in here. And you might be thinking, Okapi, we're in the middle of a desert, why would you need a heat lamp? But as I've mentioned before, it gets very cold, and at night if you didn't know. So I may as well add one just for realism. You can see I was playing around with the time of day a bit just to see when it would look best, and the lighting actually really worked out well for this habitat. I thought it turned out quite well. I did add a water fountain, and the tap is from the barnyard pack, just so it looked like it had a constant supply of water. And I did add a lot of tennis balls, as you'll see in a minute. Now, I tried to make it look like the keepers tried to disguise the door, but not very well. I wasn't trying to actually hide it myself, but I thought why not make it look like the staff at the zoo have made an attempt to hide it, and they've done their best, let's say. I did this by adding the aquatic faux rocks and panels and just hid them right behind it so it's seamless with the rock wall behind, and I added some rocks and a bit of grass in here, and you wouldn't probably get that in a real zoo, but I just assumed that you may as well because it's a fictional zoo, so in reality I can do whatever I want with it. I did also add some vines along the top, like I saw in Amsterdam, Royal Zoo, and I thought this was a really cool idea, and I did try to add some dead vines as well, just to show that obviously it is a desert zoo, but even though the keepers would water the plants and you can still die out, unfortunately just two natural circumstances, so I added that all along the building, and on the roof I did actually decorate it and make it a natural roof using some of the desert plants from this region, the Atacama desert. And so I thought let's just add them to make it look natural, and I did a few more trees to cover up any spots that so it won't work out well. And then on top of the rock walls inside the habitat, I added a layer of grass and plants, and to make it look realistic and almost so the meerkats have made their home in a ditch in the desert somewhere, which I'm actually really proud of how this section of the habitat came out. The triodia grass and buffalo grass were definitely carrying this habitat. Let me tell you, it worked out so well. In my opinion, I'm really glad that we have these in the game and the free updates as well, in case anyone doesn't have the grasslands pack. I did hide the keeper gate round the back, and which I don't love doing. I do like to try and put it in a realistic place, but the keepers wouldn't have been able to access the rest of the habitat if I put it inside, so I thought why not leave it here. I did also change staff uniform to go with more of our zoo's colours, and I think I will change it again though. I'm not too happy with how I turned out, but if you guys have any suggestions, please do let me know in the comments down below, and also please consider subscribing if you made up to this point in the video. You must be enjoying my content, so please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out. As you can see here, I was playing around with the traversable area of the meerkats, and I'll just say it's very unrealistic in Planet Zoo because the meerkats would easily be able to walk through this in real life, but somehow they just couldn't. But I promise you guys they could before, so something's just happened here. So I ended up cutting out a load of footage of me just playing around and trying to them to fit in. At this point guys, I decided to move on to the gift shop, and that's right, you're getting 2 in 1. So I started by making the walls 3 meters tall instead of 4, just because I thought 4 is quite an unrealistic height. And you're never really going to see 4-meter walls on just an average building, and especially in these very traditional buildings that you find in this desert. And I did also add some banners across the doors, and I'm using a lot of the plaster and South American thatch roofs because these are just perfect for what I'm trying to get done. You can see me going back and forth between this building and the entrance building, and that's because I'm using lots of the same colors and items, and as I'm sure you just saw, we had a cut in the video, and I cut to building and these shelves, and that's because unfortunately my game crashed. I built so many shelves and I filled them all up, and then the crash happened and they were all gone, so I had to spend another half an hour trying to model into this building again, which was a bit of a waste of time, but oh well, things happen. I was trying to stick to more deserty animals for these gifts, like the souvenirs and animals you'll find in the desert. I didn't decide to put a spider there or something. I decided to go with desert and savanna animals, and I loaded up the shelves with cups and board games and hats and teddies because I thought I should probably only advertise animals that we actually have. I did also create a t-shirt stand, and I was actually really happy with how this came out. This whole gift shop was actually inspired by the gift shop in the Menorca Zoo, where I went last year with my family, and it was really amazing, and I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're going with kids. It's a great zoo for children and the family. I did add a few plants in between, and while these may not be the most realistic plants to find a desert scene, those are the only ones that I thought would be better than the flowering plants, to be honest. I also created a flower out of these tile pieces and from the Africa pack, and I thought they worked really well as a nice floor, especially like I said with the tiles. Here you can see me making the t-shirt stand. I did the same thing with the same color wood, and I added the grasslands hinge as a bolt. And in lots of t-shirt stands you have this elastic mesh so you can pull out a t-shirt from the bottom if you need to. So I tried to recreate that with the grasslands animal pack metal posts. These really are a lifesaver, and for a while they were actually the thinnest piece in game until we did get, I can't actually remember what it was. I think it might be the 10th string in the Zookeeper animal pack, which is slightly thinner, but it really does have a good effect. But for this, I thought I'll probably just use the Grasslands pack signpost. As you can see, I am adding some detail on the inside of the gift shop, and I'm doing some netting just because I didn't exactly know what to do to fill up the wall. So I did some nets, and I added in a greenery wall and used some of the tropical pack panels and some mesh because I've seen things like that before. done really well, so I might as well try it here. And before anyone says, I know this is not accurate for a desert zoo, but we can just imagine the staff water every day, same with any outdoor plants, you can just assume that they get watered quite regularly. Unfortunately, none of this is functional because the gift shops still do not work properly for me. And so the counter is purely for display. I did also work on a second shop next to it, which is for selling plant pots and plants in general. And again, this is not exactly something you'd see in a zoo, but we can imagine that this is the shop where the local people go, because this is set in sort of a small village to bring tourism to that place, to give them more fun than I imagined. So there's a bit of lore for you, but we can imagine this is where the locals go for any plant pots or gardening materials in general that they may need for their homes. I was thinking about adding a door to these buildings, but I thought it gets hot enough anyway. We don't want to trap the heat in, and I left it without, and I used the tropical pack and brick floor and colored it the same color as the sand that I used in the meerkat habitat, so I could add some detail and like as if some of the sand was pouring into the floor. This shop is built more with the natural rock that you'll find around this area, and the other one has been plastered over, and I did add some windows into the back as well. I actually added some food in this shop as well. I think if I remember correctly, I had some apples, potatoes, and maybe bananas, but I can't remember to be honest with you. I imagine that at specific points there is a sign, and it will be labeled with what food you could feed the animals possibly, or maybe at shows you could feed them then, when zookeepers specifically say. I also thought that we could use some of lion signs and maybe place that food item in front to signify which food could be used for what animal. Like, for example, if we're going up to a hippo habitat, you could feed it a watermelon. I mean, I don't actually know we'll do a hippo habitat and it's not on my plan, but we could always add one. Please let me know, guys, what animals you want to see in a future episode. I'm currently working on Gobi Desert section. So, a little sneak peek, I'm going to be doing an ibex habitat. Ibexes were always on my plan as my first Gobi animal. Let's just pretend it's one of the ibex that can be actually found in the Gobi Desert, because in Planet Zoo we only have the European ibex, but I thought it looks close enough to the ibex found in the Gobi Desert. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's the Himalayan ibex. Anyways, that is what I've had planned for next episode, and again, like I said, let me know if you have any other suggestions for different areas. I've already sort of doing like a native section with South American desert animals and a North African area, but for now, and I've got plans for a Gobi Desert area, a butterfly house garden, and a water buffalo habitat as another entrance animal, and that's literally the only plans I've got right now. But I am definitely 100% going to add more animals, and I'm going to try and do as many desert and savanna animals as I can. Anyway, back to the video, and as you can see here, I'm working on the counter for the end of the second area of the gift shop, and I did the same thing that I did before with the wood color, but I changed it just slightly so it looks a bit sandier, and I added paths throughout the whole thing, and the visitors could always use them, but there's nothing to see in there, so they don't want to. I did the same techniques that I did with the meerkat area, and I added lots of sandy decals to make it look like the path has been blended with the sand, and I also did decorate around a bit with some agave plants and some cacti, just some details, and I did add a few benches in case anyone wants to sit with any of their food, then people just want to eat it there. And I also added a well, and which again, I imagine that the villagers can come in and drink out of the well if they need to, or they could use it just as display, I don't know, and I haven't thought that far ahead. This is pretty much it. And thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please consider subscribing if you enjoy this kind of content, and I'll see you guys next time.